So let's begin with the data entry fields in Storyline. Now, data entry fields are just a way for you to collect information from your learners, and that information is then stored in the form of a variable. It can still be adjusted with triggers. You can still change the value of it, and of course, that information can always be displayed on any other slide or layer in your course using a variable reference. Now, there are two types of data entry fields, text entry and numeric entry. With text entry, which is what we're working on today, it allows you to accept alphanumeric characters, so words, text, right? And one of the easiest ways to look at these is to just ask the learner for their name and then display that name later in the course, like on a different slide. So let's take a look at how that process works right here. So in this example, we're asking you, hey, what's your name? Go ahead and enter it. And we do that by coming up to the Insert tab. And all the way over here under Interactive Objects, we have Input. And at the very bottom, we have both of the data entry options, which is the text entry option and the numeric entry. So working with text today, so we'll select text and grab it and just click anywhere on the slide. Now, when we first started, I mentioned that when you work with the data entry fields, Storyline's actually going to take care of the variables for you, and that's what's happening. So we don't see anything different. Everything looks kind of okay. If you look over here in the triggers panel, right, we see that our first example is set text entry equal to the typed value when the control loses focus. So this right here, this text entry, is the variable that Storyline just created for us. And if we open up the project variables over here in the far corner, right, we can see that we now have our first variable created for us. It's called text entry. Now, once you create a variable, you can always change the name of it, right? So that can change. We can say first name. That's what you want to use. That's what we're going to capture for the learner. So the name can always be changed, and that doesn't affect any of your triggers. You'll see that when I close out of this, text entry will be updated automatically to the new variable name I gave. So that's really cool. You don't have to go back and make all those changes. But the type of variable that you set can't be changed. I can't change anything. If I double click it, you can see the name field is editable, my default value, but I cannot change the type of value, the type of variable, that we set. So if I needed a number in this case or a true false, I'd have to create a new one and then give it the similar name. Default value is just whatever you want that value to start. So if I wanted the name to be blank, which is what we start with, which is sort of the default way of working, leave it empty. If I wanted it to say something, to be a choice by default, then I could add that value right here. We'll see that in a little later when we look at, do we want to add narration or closed captions to the course? Maybe we want to choose a default and we'll say yes or no, so that by default, it's always going to be set a certain way, and then it's only up to the learner to change that if they want to make any changes, if they want to reverse that or add a different choice, right? And we'll look at that and where we would change the default value. Use count is really helpful when you start working in bigger projects. In this case, it's not helping us too much because we only have a single use right here, but it'll tell you where all the places that variable is being used. So right now, text entry is being used on slide 1.3, and if we come all the way over here, we can see that's it, 1.3. And we can choose, it says untitled scene, which is what we're in. But when you're working on really large projects with a lot of variables and they're all over the place, this is sort of invaluable for debugging and jumping in and kind of troubleshooting your projects. Not a big deal here. We just have it. We're only using one. It's easy. First name has been changed. When I click OK, you can see right here that first name is now updated automatically in our triggers panel, which is really cool. So this is asking me as the, as a course designer, I put this on the slide, but as the learner, it's asking me to enter my name into this field. Now, this is just like a text box. We can format this any other way we like. We can add a stronger outline to it. If we wanted to fill it with something, right, we can do that as well. So you can customize this in a lot of different ways. If we want to change the font, we can. The only thing I'd say is whatever fonts you use in here should be on the user's machine. If they don't, these will default to a system font. So, things like bold, center aligned are great, But if you use a fancy font that the learner doesn't have, then you won't see that. You'll see it in preview because you have the font, but your learners will just see it as a regular system font that's close to it, but it won't be the same unless they have it. So if you're going to customize the fonts, just know that your learners will need to have that font specifically. It's not the same as fonts that you use in the rest of your course that can be custom because they get rendered when you publish, but because this is dynamic, the font needs to exist on the learner's machine. So if I preview this file, not a lot's going to happen. Storyline's going to gather this information for us, right? It's going to process the value of whatever we enter, but we're not doing anything with it, right? We're not adjusting it. We're not using it. So my name is David. That's it. And once I click away, Storyline has adjusted the value, right? Once I lose focus of this text box, once I get out of this text box, Storyline has, once I get out of this text box, click away from it or tab away from it, I've adjusted the variable. It changed from nothing to my name. Now, the last step would be to use it, or display it, or evaluate what was entered in here, and then make a choice. So the reason we know that Storyline is using it, or the way we can verify that Storyline has adjusted it, is by using what's called a variable reference. Now, variable reference is just a way for you to display the value of a variable. Variable can only hold one piece of data at a time, and that piece of data can be displayed at any point in the course. That's helpful in two reasons. One, for you, the course developer, because it lets you validate that things are working as they should or not working, and then lets you troubleshoot it. And two, it also lets you show the learner the value of that variable. So if it's their name, show them their name. If you're just trying to evaluate what was typed and then send them somewhere else to a different slide, you need to evaluate that, and that's what you'd use to verify it's working. So here's how these work. It's just a really simple process. It's just a text box, really. So you go to Insert, and then Text Box, and then drop a text box on your slide. Don't lose that active text box. Keep it blinking. Just click away, but don't move the mouse away, but don't click on the slide. Otherwise, it'll go away. Go back up to Insert, click Reference, and Reference lets us grab the value of the variable. Now, we only have one here. It's first name, but we might have, a bunch of different variables for our course, and we could choose whichever one we wanted. So we'll click OK, and I'll make this just a little bigger. So the way it works is we use the % signs that on either side of the variable name, and that tells Storyline, hey, don't just treat this as a text object, treat this as, hey, pull in the value of the variable. So if you are commonly using variables and you get familiar with these names, you could just do something like this. This is how I'd say that the pros would do it. Control-T on your keyboard. That automatically brings up your keyboard, your text box, text field, % sign, and then whatever the variable name is. So first name, and then % sign. So you can just type it out. I mean, there's no magic to it. It's just a simple string of text with these two symbols that then get used differently with Storyline to tell it, hey, put the value of the name in here. So once you're comfortable doing this, and as long as you remember what your variable names are, you can just type it out right on the slide, and it saves a lot of time. So here's what it looks like now when we preview it. So there's nothing displaying, but when I type in, say David, now the trigger says set the value of the variable to this when control loses focus. Control loses focus means the moment I'm not focused inside of this text box. So I can come in here and type a bunch of times and nothing's happening, or I put my name in, but the moment I click away or tab or move out of here, I've lost focus to that field, and now you can see the names appear. So if I wanted to update this, nothing's happening, right? Because my focus is still inside of the text box. But the moment it leaves, it changes. Well, I guess I should change it to something else, right? So there, change. And that variable reference right there is showing me whatever the value is of the text box. That's huge because that tells me that what I typed is this, and I can validate that that's what's also showing up here. So I don't need this on this slide for me as a developer, but I will use that variable reference in context to personalize my course for the learner. So here's what that would look like. So I don't need 2 of these, so just delete that. I'm going to leave this on the slide just because it helps us, but I would, as a course developer, when I was ready to share this with my course, my learners, or publish it, I would do one of 2 things. I would just move it off the slide, get it out of the way, because it kind of interrupts what my design is doing here, or I might leave it on the slide and then just, it's in here in the timeline. There it is. Reference. I might just turn it off right here. Typically don't like to do that, only because if I'm working in turning things on and off and I forget that it's off and I just come up here to quickly show hide all, I might forget to manually turn this one off. So my preference, and again, doesn't not matter how you do it, is just to move it off the slide, and then it's always there if I need it, but it never have to worry about it accidentally showing it published and then having to republish everything. So that's just another option for working with them. So what I'll do is I'm going to come to another slide, and I want to display the name. I want to personalize that here in this congratulatory feedback box. Hey, you just created your first variable in reference. Well, I can personalize it. It's already copied the text, so let's just add a comma, space, and then Control V, and I just paste it in, right? My reference. Now I could easily just leave it. If I didn't want to do that, I could have added the comma and gone up here to insert reference, because we already have an active text box here, right? Could have gone to reference and then grabbed it this way and clicked OK, and then that inserts it right in there. So it still works within this other sentence, right? So that part is the variable, and then there's the exclamation point, because it's basically going to be whatever the value is here, my name, David, exclamation point, right? Congratulations, but I guess, yeah, that's fine. You just created your first variable. And if I want to color this too, to make this even stand out more for the learner, right, we can do that. Man, might be a good idea just to highlight it, make it easy for them. And then I could also, if I wanted to, bring it in on a certificate, Control V, paste it. I'll center align this, and then let's just align it to the slide. So here's 2 different contexts for using it. Got it here within this little note from the course, and then I'm capturing it up here. So I'll preview the scene and take a look and see how this works. All right, intro, type your name, David. Next, congratulations, you just created your first variable. And when I come next to the next slide, there's my name, and I probably want to make that just a little bit bigger. But there's a really easy use case for working with variables or text entry variables to capture input from the learner, right? You're asking the learner for some information, and then from there, you're going to display that information for them and provide it with context as a way to personalize how the course goes. So here's 2 examples, certificate and the chat box. All right, so that allows us to capture the learner name, but what happens if the learner jumps over this and doesn't enter anything into the name field, right? So it gets through this. There we are, we're asking for the name. I click next, and see, it's sort of, the punctuation now looks a little bit off right here because it sort of has the comma and then an empty space, right? The learner didn't input anything, so that value didn't get changed. So a couple options you have. You could set the value for the learner, right? So if this is empty, when they click the next slide, we're going to change the value. Or we could add a little alert box that says, hey, there's nothing in here. You need to keep changing this and, enter your name. So here's what that would look like with a little alert. So if I look at my triggers, we have 2 triggers on the slide, and it says jump to next slide when the user clicks next, jump to previous slide. We're going to add some conditions here that shows a layer that we'll create if this value is blank. So the first thing we'll do is we'll create on this one, this is where we want to be. We'll create a new layer, and we'll just call this alert. And it's a good time to add a icon from 360. So we'll call this an alert and see what we have here. Oh, I like this one because it looks like a chat box, right? That's good. So there's my alert icon. And then I'll just add a text box here. Please add your name. Continue in. All right. So quick and dirty alert box. I'll center that a little bit. Something like that. And just to make this go away so the learner doesn't have to interact with it, let's make the timeline 3 seconds. And we will auto close this layer when the timeline ends. So we'll add a new trigger that says hide, right? Hide layer, this layer when timeline ends. And then of course the timeline being for the alert layer, not one of these objects. Although I guess it would be the same because they're all the same duration. But in this case, we'll just change it when the layer goes, the alert layer ends. So after 3 seconds, this will automatically close. And what we want to do here is have 2 versions of the jump to next slide, right? Because right now, if they click it, they're automatically going to go to the next slide. Now, what we want to do is have first we'll add a layer, a trigger that says for the layer, show alert layer if the value of first name is blank, right? So here's what that looks like. Show layer, show me a layer, and the layer in this case would be the alert layer when user clicks the next button, right? So that seems a little odd, right? If we left it like this, it would not help us, right? The next button's going to become a show layer button. But this is where the conditions will help. The conditions mean we just want to add an extra condition if something is true or not true in this case. So we're going to add a new condition. And the condition is if the variable that we're working with, first name, is equal to, and we'll leave that blank, right? So by leaving it blank, if there's no value, nothing changes, then show me the alert layer. So click OK. And that's what that should show. I'm going to move this to the top, right? And I'm going to modify the next button so that it only jumps to the next slide when something is changed, when this field is no longer blank. So we're going to add an extra condition, so show conditions. And the condition here is when the variable, same process we just did, first name, is not equal to blank, right? So if as long as it's not blank, I mean, we could evaluate whether, certain names are in here, but that's could be a lot of triggers. So we don't really care about what they put. We just need them to put something. So click OK. And we're saying just as long as it's not blank, go ahead and jump to the next slide, show the layer if it's blank. So let's take a look at the scene now. Skip through those first 2. I'm going to leave it blank, click next. There's my alert, and it should go away after 3 seconds, and it still keeps asking me to add my name. And I could, draw an arrow to this field or something. So if I say David and go next, there we go, and it jumps to the next slide, and everything's working. So it's a quick way to add a little condition to kind of prompt the learner, say, hey, we're really here, we're really listening, we're making sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And just adding simple conditions to the next button, as well as an additional layer with a condition to evaluate whether or not this field is blank. All right, so if you're going to personalize your course and you want to refer, for example, to the learner by their name throughout the project, or at least through a lot of slides, you can add that reference to the slide master. So you don't have to drop it manually on every slide each time you want to use it. So the same reference, the same thing we were just looking at. Pull this up right here, right? We have first name here. We can actually just take that reference and then put it on our slide. So in this example, we sort of set this up already for us. We're not going to rebuild everything, but we have a text entry field right here. And if you see over here in the triggers, it's doing the same thing we just did. Set the value equal to whatever the typed value is when control loses focus. And then we did add a condition here on the continue button. So by default, the continue button is set to disabled, right? The initial state is disabled, and we're only going to change the state of the condition button to normal when a value is entered. And so that's what, if I just pull up this trigger right here, that's what you see, right? So change the state of the continue button to normal when variable changes, variable being the first name, when the first name is not equal to anything, blank. And that's what you see when it's not blank. So what I want to do then is go into my slide master and then drop that reference of this variable onto all of the slides. So come up to View and Slide Master, and that takes you directly to the current slide you're on. I want to put this on all of my slides. It may not work because some of the slides have cover slides, but that's okay. But as a quick and easy way to show you how this works, we'll just work here at the parent slide. So I want to insert that reference. So insert text box, and I'll just drop it right here. Come back up here to insert reference and select my name, my variable name. So there's first name, and I can just put it up here in the top corner. If I want to personalize this, I'm going to turn everything off for a second, and I could say user name colon, and let's make sure this is right aligned so that I don't have to worry about. Right? And then let's just make that bold. And I'll make that just a little bit lighter. All right, so username, first name. And I'll make sure to turn everything back on. But you'll see that that cascades down through the other slides. So if I want to personalize the course, and maybe I don't start it off on the first slide, however you want to do it, you can choose selectively which slides to put that on. But here we go. So click OK. I don't see it here, but then I'll see it on all of these other slides. It's not going to be accessible, right from the slide level, but once we've gathered the name, that's all we need, and it should be here underneath the, yep, there it is, just under the background graphic. All right, so we'll preview the slide, or the scene. And we'll come down here to the welcome layout. Continue button is disabled, and we don't want to show that until we type in a name. So David, control loses focus, the button is active, click continue, and then username David, and my name is now personalized throughout the rest of the course. So, and it may not work with every layout here. That's where you'd have, as the course designer, you'd have to work that into your, your course designs, but it's a simple and efficient way to at least get your user's name displayed throughout all the slides without having to manually paste it on each slide. So the slide masters will totally respect whatever variable references you have, and so you could also use that to display current score, points, and things like that throughout the project. So just an easy way to use the slide masters for that.